Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Javad Tehami and these are the headlines. UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet has expressed concern over restrictions and clampdown on civil society activists in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Addressing the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Bachelet said the communications blockade has badly affected the lives of Kashmiris. Pakistan's army has killed the commander of a banned terrorist outfit in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. In a statement, the military's media wing said Nuristan alias Hassan Baba was killed in an intelligence-based operation in South Waziristan. The military said he was a high-value target who had killed more than 50 security personnel since 2007. Pakistan has signed a deal with Qatar to import liquefied natural gas for 10 years. Federal Minister for Energy Umar Ayub Khan and his Qatari counterpart Saad Sharaid Al-Kabi inked the pact in Islamabad. Prime Minister Imran Khan attended the ceremony. Later, speaking in Lahore, the Prime Minister said the deal will help the nation save $300 million annually. An Iraqi militia official says the USA strikes against an Iranian-backed group in Syria killed one fighter and wounded a number of others. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights has put the death toll at 22. The Pentagon said the strikes were retaliation for a rocket attack in Iraq earlier this month that killed a civilian contractor and wounded a US soldier. In Nigeria, police have confirmed the abduction of over 300 girls after gunmen raided a secondary school in northwestern state of Zamfara. This is the second such kidnapping in the region in recent weeks. Brazil has become the second country to surpass 250,000 COVID-19 deaths with 10 million cases. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered more than 1,500 cases and 32 deaths in the last 24 hours. The country has recorded over 12,800 fatalities since the pandemic began. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.5 million lives and infected more than 112 million people. And in the Pakistan Super League, Peshawar Zalmi have put Quetta Gladiators into bat at the National Stadium in Karachi. The Gladiators are yet to win a game. In an earlier match, Multan Sultans beat Lahore Qalandars by 7 wickets to register their first win of the tournament. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet has expressed concern over restrictions and clampdown on civil society activists in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Addressing a session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Bachelet said the communications blockade has badly affected the lives of Kashmiris. Bachelet also expressed concern over the curbs on freedom of expression in India. She said the sedition charges filed against journalists for covering the ongoing farmers' protest is a violation of human rights. Pakistan's military has killed a commander of the banned terrorist outfit Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in an operation in the country's northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing said Nuristan alias Hassan Baba was killed in an intelligence-based operation on his hideout in the Sharwangi Tiarza area of the South Waziristan district. The military said Hassan Baba was a high-value target involved in the martyrdom of more than 50 security forces personnel since 2007. Nuristan was a known improvised explosive devices expert and master trainer of terrorist recruits. Islamabad says India has failed in its designs to get Pakistan added to the blacklist of the Financial Action Task Force. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad successfully addressed 24 out of 27 points. Qureshi said Pakistan's compliance efforts have been praised by many countries as well as the FATF. He reaffirmed that Islamabad will fulfill all its commitments by June this year. Meanwhile, a Minister for Industries, Hamad Azhar, said the task force noted Pakistan's significant improvement on the remaining 3 points as well. Speaking to the media, he said Pakistan completed 90% of the tasks given by FATF despite COVID-19. Azhar added that India's involvement in terror financing is known to all. Pakistan has signed a $1.1 billion deal with Qatar to import liquefied natural gas for 10 years. Prime Minister Imran Khan attended the ceremony held at the Prime Minister's house in Islamabad. Federal Minister for Energy Umar Ayub Khan and his Qatari counterpart Saad Sharaida Al-Kabi inked the pact. Later, speaking at the groundbreaking ceremony of the Central Business District in Lahore, Imran Khan said the deal will help the nation save $3 million annually. The government says the funds will be utilized to import petroleum products during 2021. The UN has welcomed an understanding between Pakistan and India to stop cross-border fighting along the line of control. In a statement, a spokesperson for the UN Secretary General said the decision is an opportunity for further dialogue. President of the UN General Assembly, Volkan Bozkir, also welcomed the agreement. Bozkir said the deal set an example for others and demonstrated the General Assembly's values. Earlier, the US hailed the ceasefire as a positive step. It said peace and stability in South Asia are in the shared interest of both the countries. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki urged both the sides to keep building upon the progress. President Arif Alvi says Pakistan can help Iraq develop infrastructure by providing technical assistance and human resource. He said this in a meeting with a visiting Iraqi delegation led by its defense minister in Islamabad. Alvi said Pakistan attaches a great importance to the mutually beneficial ties with Iraq. He said Pakistan supports the political unity and territorial integrity of Iraq. Alvi also offered training courses for the Iraqi military personnel in Pakistan's defense institutes. An Iraqi militia official says the US airstrikes against an Iranian-backed group in Syria killed one fighter and wounded a number of others. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights has put the death toll at 22. This is the first military action undertaken by the US President Joe Biden's administration. The Pentagon said the strikes were retaliation for a rocket attack in Iraq earlier this month that killed a civilian contractor and wounded a US soldier. Syria has condemned the strikes and called for respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity. The US says it will work for a strong and transparent bilateral partnership with Saudi Arabia. This comes after President Joe Biden held a telephonic conversation with Saudi King Salman. In a statement, the White House said Biden and Salman discussed regional security and other issues. It added that the leaders affirmed the historic nature of the relationship. Saudi state media said King Salman congratulated Biden on his election victory. It said the two reviewed destabilizing Iranian activities and the US commitment to defend Saudi Arabia against such threats. Biden and Salman also discussed joint efforts to bolster Saudi defenses and cooperation in ending the war in Yemen. In Nigeria, hundreds of schoolgirls appear to have been kidnapped in the northwestern state of Zamfara. Police say 317 students are unaccounted for after gunmen raided a secondary school. This is the second such kidnapping of the students in the region in little more than a week. Last week, a gunman killed a student in an overnight attack at a boarding school and abducted 42 people, including 27 students in the north-central Nigeria. They are yet to be released. In Mali, 9 people have been killed in twin attacks on a military post in the central town of Bandiagra. The Malian army says 9 others were wounded in the attacks, with 5 of them in a serious condition. Officials said unidentified assailants attacked the base, setting buildings alight and stealing weapons, vehicles. Militant groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS regularly attacked Malian security forces and the UN peacekeepers in the area. The region has seen a string of deadly attacks since the start of the year, including a roadside bomb that killed 4 UN peacekeepers. 8 Rohingya refugees have died and 81 others were rescued from a boat adrift in the Indian Ocean. The United Nations had earlier raised alarm over the missing boat, which set off from Bangladesh on February 11. Authorities said another refugee was missing in the Andaman Sea. 2 ships were sent to help the rescue, 23 of whom were children. Out of the refugees, officials say the boat's engine failed after 4 days at sea, and those on board ran out of food and water. Many were ill and suffering from extreme dehydration by the time they were rescued. In Myanmar, police have fired guns to disperse demonstrators in the main city of Yangon, and in Mandalay, riot police opened fire at protesters gathered against the military coup. Police blocked off roads and launched a crackdown on protesters in Yangon. Tokyo says police have also detained a Japanese national in the city. Witnesses say journalist Yuki Kitazumi was baton charged by police and sustained head injuries. This is the first detention of a foreign reporter since the army takeover on February 1. The United States says it will hold Russia accountable for its aggression against Crimea. In a statement, President Joe Biden said Washington will never recognize Russia's annexation of the peninsula. He said Russia violated international law and territorial integrity of Ukraine when it invaded Crimea. This comes on the anniversary of Moscow's 2014 annexation of the peninsula. It was followed by a Russian military intervention in Crimea and was part of a wider unrest across eastern Ukraine. Last month, Biden spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin and pressed him on a range of issues, including Ukraine's sovereignty. In Russia, jailed opposition politician Alexei Navalny has been transferred to a penal colony where he will serve out his jail sentence. State media reports Kremlin critic has been transferred out of a maximum security jail in Moscow. This comes a day after Navalny's lawyer said he had been moved to an undisclosed location outside of the capital. The Kremlin critic was arrested last month when he returned to Moscow from Berlin over alleged parole violations. He was later convicted and sentenced on February the 2nd to almost 3 years in prison. Last week, the European Court of Human Rights ordered Russia to release Navalny, but Moscow rejected the call. Turkey says the U.S. sanctions over Ankara's purchase of the Russian S-400 defense system are against the spirit of NATO alliance. Addressing an event in Kayseri province, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the S-400 issue is the national matter for Turkey. He said the air defense systems have become a necessity for the country in the face of increasing risks and threats. Akar added that S-400 does not harm anyone if there is no intention to attack Turkey. U.S. officials have opposed the deal, claiming the S-400s would be incompatible with the NATO systems. But Turkey says the S-400s will not be integrated into NATO systems and has proposed a working group to examine the issue. Libya's Prime Minister-designate has failed to name members of his new cabinet as the UN roadmap deadline expires. This has caused doubts over his transitional government's ability to unite different factions of the country. Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh was set to announce his cabinet in a news conference and send it to Libya's House of Representatives for approval. Instead, he told reporters he only shared proposed guidelines to select cabinet members with the legislators. He said the submission of guidelines was in line with the deadline set by the UN roadmap. The UN-backed roadmap envisions holding general elections in the country by the end of the year. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Brazil has become the second country to surpass 250,000 COVID-19 deaths with 10 million cases. Elsewhere, the UN Security Council is set to vote on a British drafted resolution which demands a ceasefire to allow for vaccinations in all conflict-torn regions. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.5 million lives and infected more than 112 million people. More in this report.
While the fear of another wave driven by new variants of COVID-19 looms, recent statistics bring a little relief. A report by the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation says coronavirus cases and deaths are declining faster than expected. However, the director of the U.S. National Institutes of Health said new and more contagious variants can fuel a new surge. Meanwhile, U.S. Food and Drug Administration has allowed the Pfizer vaccine to be transported and stored up to 2 weeks at normal freezer temperatures. President Joe Biden marked the successful administering of 50 million COVID-19 vaccine doses as he warned of a tough, long road ahead.
But the time is coming, maybe 60 to 90 days, when the supply is adequate, but not enough people can access the shots or don't want them. To address that challenge, we're going to launch a massive campaign to educate people about vaccines, that they are safe and effective.
In Europe, the situation continues to get grimmer. European Council President Charles Michel says vaccine rollout will continue to be difficult for at least the next few weeks. France is also imposing new restrictions around its borders with Germany as it tries to contain a fresh surge. Oxford University is investigating a digital intrusion after claims that its COVID-19 research laboratory has been hacked. Meanwhile, Queen Elizabeth has encouraged Britons to get vaccinated as concerns grow over the health of Prince Philip, hospitalized for an unspecific infection.
Well, once you've had the vaccine, you have a feeling of, you're protected, which is, I think, very important. And as far as I can make out, it was quite harmless. I think the other thing is that it is obviously difficult for people to, if they've never had a vaccine, they ought to think about other people rather than themselves.
Australia's Victoria state is set to start easing coronavirus restrictions to pre-Christmas settings. Meanwhile, Japan has decided to end a state of emergency a week earlier than scheduled in all but 4 prefectures.
Pakistan has reported 64 deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has climbed to 12,804. The ministry said 1,541 more people contracted the virus overnight. Out of over 577,000 infected in the country, more than 542,000 have recovered. The ministry said the number of active cases is over 22,000. It added 1,558 patients are in critical condition. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has welcomed Sri Lanka's decision to allow the burial of COVID-19 victims. Earlier, Sri Lanka's health ministry announced it was lifting the controversial ban. In a tweet, Khan thanked the government for issuing a formal notification. Earlier, during Imran Khan's visit to the country, Muslim parliamentarians urged him to take up the issue with Sri Lankan leaders. In March last year, Sri Lanka began cremation and banned burial, saying the virus could spread by contaminating groundwater. But the claim lacked a scientific base, as the WHO termed it a myth. The US has urged all the parties in Armenia to exercise restraint as the Prime Minister warns of a military coup in the country. A State Department spokesperson says Washington is following the situation in Armenia very closely.
In a press briefing, Ned Price said armed forces should not intervene in domestic politics. Price said Armenian leaders must resolve their differences peacefully while respecting the rule of law. Earlier, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan invited the opposition to hold talks to discuss the political crisis. Addressing his supporters at a rally, Pashinyan said that the people will not allow a military coup to take place. He said he has told the army to do its job and defend the country. The army's demand for the Prime Minister's resignation comes months after Armenia lost the war and territory to Azerbaijan.
The US has condemned Venezuela's decision to expel the head of the European Union delegation. In a statement, the State Department said Caracas removed an international champion of democracy and human rights. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the action will further isolate President Nicolas Maduro's government. The European Union later declared Venezuela's envoy to Brussels persona non grata in a tit-for-tat move. In a statement, it said the expulsion of its ambassador was unwarranted and contrary to the spirit of partnership. The population of monarch butterflies that arrived in Mexico's forests to hibernate has fallen by 26%. The World Wildlife Fund says the butterflies occupied only 2.1 hectares in December 2020 compared with 2.8 hectares in 2019. In a statement, the WWF said climate change has had a considerable impact on the migration pattern. The climate crisis also caused a reduction in the milkweed breeding habitat in the United States. Millions of orange and black monarch butterflies migrate to Mexico on a 2,000-mile journey each year from Canada. Mexico's western state of Michoacan is home to the country's largest butterfly reserve. Former U.S. Olympics gymnastics coach John Gedder has committed suicide. Gedder had earlier been charged with human trafficking and sexual assault. Authorities say the former coach was also charged with criminal enterprise and lying to a police officer. Gedder had ties to disgraced U.S. team doctor Larry Nassar. In a statement, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel said death was a tragic end to a tragic story for everyone involved. A young girl flying to Los Angeles received an appetizing birthday surprise when a flight attendant offered her birthday cake mid-air. The special upgrade to Sophia's in-flight meal was served with a round of applause from her fellow passengers. The flight attendants even went so far as to embellish the cake with sticks to replace candles, which are banned on flights. Sophia's parents thanked Spirit Airlines for the hospitality on social media, saying the gesture made it a wonderful day. In France, canary, parakeets and zebra finches will no longer chirp from small cages in the shadow of the Notre Dame Cathedral. This comes after authorities in Paris voted to close the 19th century bird market, deeming it inappropriate for this day and age. What in this report?
Held on Sundays, the market on LANKA'S side aisles on the River Seine has been a magnet for tourists and citizens for decades. But campaigning by animal rights groups and renovation plans led to a city council decision to close it. Authorities say the market poses a risk to endangered species, which are trafficked despite efforts to intercept them.
The city of Paris has decided to end the bird market for two major reasons. The first is that the bird market has become an epicenter of trafficking birds in the Paris region, and they continue despite a number of efforts to apprehend them by the Paris City Hall and the French Biodiversity Agency. And in particular, there's traffic of endangered bird species, which tends to persist.
The city says 13 people have a license to sell the birds at the market, but only 7 use it, and most of them also sell other things like pet supplies. Bird merchants admit that some of them were not respecting the rules, but say that it was up to the police to enforce them.
These are only birds that are born in cages. If you let them fly, they'll die. They don't even know how to fly. Yes, they'll fly, but how will they feed themselves? They will only last 3 days in the summer, eating flower buds and all that. And after a while, they will die. And in winter, it's cold, they won't find food, there will be nothing to eat. They're not meant for life outdoors.
The vendors fear bankruptcy and now are not sure what to do with the stock that is left. The City Hall has vowed to help vendors to find alternative livelihoods to selling birds.
In Denmark, dark winter skies have brightened up as the annual Lights Festival is underway in the capital Copenhagen. More in this report.
The extremely expressive yet quiet Copenhagen Light Festival has provided citizens with much-needed light during the cold winter season and stressful times due to the pandemic. Visitors are enjoying the illuminated buildings and artwork at the 23-day festival in the Danish capital, while also adhering to the coronavirus safety precautions.
I think it's really just what people need right now, sort of a grown-up treasure hunt, moving from one piece of art to another, each of them inviting for a moment of reflection, having a thought about, what life is about these days. And I think that has been taken down very well by our visitors.
The light installations are mostly located in and around Copenhagen city center. Amid COVID-19, guided tours, talks, and pop-up events have been cancelled this year. However, they have been replaced with an interactive map to help the visitors in finding their routes and information about the light installations in the city.
We have no enclosures or things that forces people to be together. They can watch it from a distance, or they can go on the other side of the canal. So there's a big area and many routes that they can choose from. Also, we have the app that guides people so that they can find their own way and their own tempo. So we have no problem with people getting too close.
The festival is taking place for the 4th year now, and around 30 light installations have been placed around Copenhagen.
Italian fashion house Prada reworked wardrobe classics for its fall line at the Milan Fashion Week. Designers Miuccia Prada and Ralph Simons said they were inspired by the idea of change and transformation.
Old-fashioned glamour met psychedelical print as Prada shined in Milan. Muppet faux fur sprouted in place of wallpaper. Navy and gray pinstrip suits were reimagined as jackets with short scrunched sleeves. Outerwear included wraps in fake fur, nylon, and sequences, and large loose bomber jackets. These clothes are a collaboration between long-standing designer Miuccia Prada and Ralph Simons, who joined last year. In a statement, Prada said they played with the idea of the classic, subverted, and transmuted. Simons added that there were many contrasts in this collection: retro and futuristic, embellished and minimal, sports and elegance. Milan Fashion Week, which runs until the 1st of March, is a virtual event this season due to the COVID-19 restrictions.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. The Wall Street stocks have rebounded after yesterday's volatile trading in the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite. Despite an upward trend in the market, investor sentiment remained fragile, keeping the U.S. bond yields at one-year high. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index traded fractionally down. Nasdaq Composite traded over 1% higher, while the S&P 500 index also landed in the positive territory. The possible rollout of COVID-19 vaccines and new fiscal stimulus have kept the overall markets to trade positively. Meanwhile, oil prices have dropped following a decline in bond prices and a rising US dollar. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.